are 3 steps, and in this program we're going to take them one by one. It's easy. It's vitally important. Research suggests that by reducing or avoiding the bad fats, we'll cut the likelihood that we'll ever have severe memory loss. That's step 1. And there are other powerful steps too. As you'll see, you can knock out free radicals that threaten the brain. I'm going to show you what they are. And we can use simple exercises, physical exercises, and cognitive exercises that strengthen the brain. But let's start with step 1, avoiding the bad fats. There was a study called the Chicago Health and Aging Project. They began in 1993, and everybody was healthy at the time, but the researchers tracked what everybody was eating. And then they looked over time who stays mentally clear and who starts to have memory problems. And I want to tell you about the first culprit that really caught our attention. Solid fats, saturated fats, yes, they're found in bacon, they're in butter, they're in milk products, they're in meat products, and in the Chicago study, some people didn't eat very much saturated fat, about 13 grams per day. Others had a much higher amount, about 25 grams per day. And in the Archives of Neurology, the researchers published their finding. Those people who got the most bad fats had 3 times the risk of Alzheimer's disease compared to the other people. Well, if we added up 2 eggs, 1 slice of bacon, 1 chicken thigh without the skin, a glass of milk, and a small pizza, that adds up to 25 grams. Anybody eat that way? Everybody eats that way. But not just that. Anybody ever have a donut? A cupcake? You know what I mean? Those have trans fats in them, partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. And the researchers found that the people who had a little bit of partially hydrogenated oil compared to the people who had a lot were very different in their risk of Alzheimer's disease. The people who had the most had almost 5 times the risk of developing this disease compared to the other people. Now, when doctors saw those numbers, they were horrified. They thought, this is the way people eat everywhere. We're going to have an epidemic of Alzheimer's disease. Now, I want to tell you, when I saw those numbers, I was thrilled because you can choose what you're going to have for breakfast. You can decide if you want to be in the low-risk group or the high-risk group. Let's say I'm eating 2 eggs, bacon, a chicken thigh, a glass of milk, and a pizza. Remember, meats, dairy products, and eggs. These are the sources of saturated fat. Can I do better? Because if I'm like the people in the research study, my risk is pretty high. Well, let's take that glass of milk. And I'm going to swap that, say, for almond milk. Have anybody here ever tasted almond milk? It's good. It happens to have no saturated fat. And if the research numbers apply to me, I'm getting less saturated fat, and that just cut my risk. Well, can I do more than that? Sure. How about if I replace the bacon with maybe veggie bacon? I'm going to take out the eggs. I'm going to have a big bowl of oatmeal with blueberries and strawberries or sliced bananas. And I think I'll get rid of that chicken thigh, and instead I'll have a big submarine sandwich filled with vegetables. And how am I doing? Well, my fat is much lower. And if the research numbers apply to me, my risk of Alzheimer's just dropped another notch. Can I do better still? How about that pizza? Well, if it's dripping with cheese, I'm going to pile on the veggies. I'll leave the cheese off. And, well, actually, it's a little hard to know how you'll do. But researchers in Loma Linda, California, they looked at people who did vary quite dramatically in their eating habits. And in a journal called Neuroepidemiology, at one extreme, there were a group called heavy meat eaters, and they tended to succumb to dementia pretty quickly. At the other end of the spectrum, the vegetarians who were avoiding meat, they tended to preserve their brain function much longer. So this is a powerful step. We're adjusting our fat intake, and that doesn't just relate to Alzheimer's disease, it also relates to that mild cognitive impairment. Do you remember we were talking about that? That's where you're having these lapses more and more commonly and you're getting worried about it. In 2008, in the International Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry, researchers from Finland reported an interesting study. They brought in a large group of people. Everybody was about 50 years old when they started, and they followed them for 21 years, into their 70s. And it turned out that those people who avoided the bad fats, the saturated fat, they greatly reduced their risk of developing this mild cognitive impairment. But wait a minute. Some people are at genetic risk, right? Well, what about this gene? That ApoE epsilon 4 allele, that's the one that makes you at risk for memory problems. Well, in this same study, the preventive power of avoiding the bad fats was even more dramatic. It cut the risk of mild cognitive impairment by 80%. And this is great news. This helps us to protect our memory. This allows us to keep the connections alive, to preserve our relationships with our loved ones. So the first step is to do a search and destroy mission for those bad fats that could threaten us. Researchers in California with Kaiser Permanente studied almost 10,000 people. They measured their cholesterol levels back in the 1960s and 70s when everybody was about 40 years old. 3 decades later, they looked to see who had memory problems and who didn't. And it turned out that a high cholesterol level increased the risk of Alzheimer's disease by 50%. You get the problems with your blood flow, not just in the heart, but also in the brain. So does that mean I need drugs? Do I need to take a cholesterol-lowering medication? Well, let's start with lowering cholesterol naturally, and that means healthy foods. But there's actually more to it. If you take a microscope and look inside the brain, you see something a little bit frightening. These little wads of yarn or meatballs, those are called amyloid plaques. And it's a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. And how they form is this beta amyloid protein comes out of the cells, out of the brain cells, like little strands of protein coming out, just like a sausage maker releasing the sausage, and the strands of protein clump together into those balls of yarn. Arizona researchers at the Haldeman Laboratory for Alzheimer's Disease Research took blood samples from individuals just at the time of death, and they then looked inside their brain as well. And a higher cholesterol level meant more beta amyloid inside their brain. So a high cholesterol seems to be a problem for this amyloid accumulating in the brain. The more copper builds up in the blood, the more there are memory problems. Well, what seems to be going on is that those plaques that are forming in the brain start to accumulate iron, and they also start to accumulate copper. Now, earlier we talked about the Chicago Health and Aging Project, the study that showed that the bad fats can harm the brain. Well, in 2006, the research team published a new finding in the Archives of Neurology. And yes, people eating bad fats were more likely to end up with Alzheimer's disease. But copper seemed to multiply the problem. People getting too much copper in their diets had an accelerated loss of memory over time. So where's all this iron coming from? Where's all this copper coming from? What can I do about it? Well, let's start in your kitchen. If you look in your kitchen, how many people have a cast iron pan? Does that iron get into foods? Will that get into your body? Well, that might be a good thing if you're low, but if you're high in iron already, you're getting too much. So a stainless steel pan would be a better choice for you. How many people have copper pipes? Well, overnight, the copper will leach into the water, and you make your morning coffee, it's got copper in the water. So use bottled water or have a water filter. Red meats, liver, they have iron and they have copper, lots of it. How many people here take a multiple vitamin every day? Did you know that they have iron and sometimes copper in your multiple vitamin? The manufacturers thought, well, you're not getting it in foods, but you are. So if your multiple vitamin has iron and copper added, you're very likely getting too much. And there are vitamins without the iron and copper. Read the label, you'll see what I mean. So remember, beans and greens, along with the fruits and the vegetables and the whole grains, they're going to give you the iron that you need. They'll give you those little traces of copper without the risk of overdoing it. And that's such an important tool. And you can use that to protect your memory. But wait a minute. What are iron and copper doing? What makes them so dangerous? We know that they're in the amyloid plaques, but what mischief are they doing there? Well, let's say I take a fry pan and I leave it out on my picnic table for a couple of days and it rains. What happens to iron? Iron rusts. And you have iron in your body, and just as the iron rusts in a pan, in your body it rusts too. We call it oxidation. And when iron oxidizes, it produces what are called free radicals. Now, a free radical starts out as an innocent molecule. It could be oxygen, but it loses an electron and it becomes very unstable. And these free radicals roam around in your blood, into your brain, and they can damage the cells of your body. They can even damage DNA. I think of them as like sparks. Each free radical can burn through connections. So the synapses, the connections, the bridges between the cells, that let you remember names and events and important facts. They're all damaged by these sparks, by these free radicals. So iron oxidizes, it encourages the free radicals to be produced, and those are the sparks that destroy our memories. Well, what about copper? If you have a shiny new penny, as the years go by, what happens? It gets darker. That's oxidation too. And so copper, as it oxidizes, encourages the production of free radicals. And that could be an even bigger problem. So bad fats or a high cholesterol level seem to encourage the formation of plaques in the brain, and copper and iron in those plaques cause the production of the free radicals that are that shower of sparks that can tear up the connections in your brain. What can I do? I don't want that to happen. I don't want to destroy my memory. Well, you've got a fire extinguisher here. It's called vitamin E. Now, vitamin E is an antioxidant, and it knocks out free radicals. Where do I find it? It's in spinach, it's in mangoes, it's in sweet potatoes, and in much larger amounts in nuts and in seeds, and it makes a real difference. In the Chicago study, some people didn't eat their mangoes or their nuts or their sweet potatoes, and they didn't get very much vitamin E. Others had a lot more of these foods, and in an article they published in JAMA, for those people who got the most vitamin E, not quite 8 milligrams a day, Alzheimer's risk was cut to less than half compared to those who only got about 4 milligrams a day. So the vitamin E was protecting them. But very important, food, not pills. You can go to the store and you can get a vitamin E pill, but it doesn't have the full range of vitamin E that you're going to get in natural foods. So you want to get it from foods. And how much? In the JAMA study, about 8 milligrams a day did the job. To help you visualize this, an ounce of nuts has about 5 milligrams of vitamin E, and an ounce is the amount in a small handful. So by the time it hits your fingers, that's more than an ounce. But an ounce of nuts has about 5 milligrams of vitamin E. So iron and copper make free radicals. Those are the sparks that are burning through the connections between the brain cells, and vitamin E is your fire extinguisher. The free radicals are formed, vitamin E neutralizes them. The very best foods help you to avoid the bad fats, keep the iron and copper modest, and they provide traces of vitamin E that you need. And the healthiest foods are vegetables, fruits, beans, whole grains, and occasional nuts. Wine does seem to help. It does seem to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease, but what if it's not the alcohol? What if it's something in the grape that is protecting them? At the University of Cincinnati, researchers tested grape juice. They brought in a group of people. Their average age was 78, and they published the results in the British Journal of Nutrition. And what they showed is that people who had grape juice every day improved their learning, and they improved their recall. How much do they need? 2 cups a day. 2 cups of ordinary Concord grape juice that you'd find at any store. Well, why? What would that do? Well, if you analyze it, what you find in the grape is something called anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are antioxidants, and they go into the bloodstream, they protect the brain, they knock out free radicals. But wait a minute. If you think about it, grapes aren't unique. There are lots of other tiny, round, darkly colored fruits, like blueberries, for example. So back into the laboratory, the researchers tested blueberry juice. 2 cups a day, exactly the same findings. Better learning, better recall. So there are powerful micronutrients that are in many foods once you know what to look for. They're surprisingly effective. So far, we've seen that foods can play a powerful role in brain health. We can avoid the bad fats. We can favor the good fats. That's step 1. We can choose foods that knock out the free radicals that could damage the brain, and that's step 2. But you have more power than that. So let's go on to step 3, exercising the brain. Did you know that physical activity, breaking a sweat, can actually protect your brain? And so can cognitive activities, simple mental exercises. And we're going to talk about all of these things. And then before we wrap up, we're going to look at how certain medicines and medical conditions could possibly harm your brain. And I'm going to show you what they are and what to do about them.